on, everybody. Really appreciate the attendance here, especially for a 9 a.m. session before the keynote. Welcome to AchyBreakyBackup. I select that title. They asked us to add country music themes. It's the best I could do. I'd like to introduce ourselves. I'm Andy Fernandez, Product Marketing Manager here at Zerto.
I'm Brandon Matt. I work at UW Health as a software analyst, part of our DR backup infrastructure team.
And I'm Tom Gillespie with Exagrid. We'll be talking a little bit about how Exagrid and Zerto have been doing some fun things together a little bit later.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So in today's session, what we're going to do is we're going to briefly discuss, what are the pitfalls of traditional backup in today's modern landscape. We'll then transition to UW Health's data protection journey. Talk a bit about the journal before we talk about a deep dive in the next session, and then also talk about Exagrid, and Tom will lead that section. So what I want to do today is really talk about something we all are aware of and experience every single day. In today's digital business, we know that a few years ago, everyone was exploring the cloud. I think everybody at this point is doing something within the cloud. They have multiple sites, hybrid cloud strategies, whether it's public, private, using a CSP. They still have things on premise. They're trying to pursue new strategic IT initiatives with IoT, big data, machine learning, any other buzzword you can think of that people enable. But the biggest change, I think, and what we've seen is the customer's expectations. Years ago, whether you were a service provider or somebody dealing at the business level, it was a 9-to-5 interaction. Today it's 24/7. What we're seeing is a lack of patience, really. People expect things 24/7. And I think a good example of what we see there is, think about how you tracked your Amazon packages 5 years ago. If you saw 4 to 5 business days, you felt good that you're going to get that. Now you want same-day shipping and you're waiting outside for the person and you're losing your mind if you don't get it by the end of the business day. That same expectation happens today from any perspective of an end user or a vendor or anything. Everyone expects things immediately. Now, in order to continue satisfying our customers, but also proactively pursue these digital transformation initiatives, we need to be able to protect that data, to deliver availability. But unfortunately, even though we've seen exponential growth and innovation in the data center and the way consumers consume technology, but traditional backup, data protection, is not meeting today's digital demands. Now, why is that? Well, when we think about snapshot and periodic-based backups, we know the impact that it has on a user, whether it's on your production environment, whether it's the amount of storage that you're consuming. It's complex. We were talking to a few customers yesterday, and they mentioned that in order to renew one of their specific backup deals, what they needed to do is hire an additional licensing expert in order for them to be able to deal with that. And we understand that although the expectations of IT grow, the budget remains stringent, and we need to be able to allocate resources efficiently. And that's a cost issue, but we also see a performance issue, whether that's in the production environment or even recovery speeds. They're not meeting SLAs. Sometimes you're dealing with multiple tools, and you're also not even sure that you're able to recover that data. So these things are a concern, and it's just not the expectation that customers have. We can't deliver on our services and deliver 24/7 availability without having the right data protection tools. If we look at our environment today, for a majority of both of our customers and folks, whether that's Zerto or another DR solution, it's siloed, right? You have one backup person, you have a DR person or a backup team and a DR team. Depending on the tiered apps, you have multiple backup tools, but then you continue your replication with Zerto or another DR solution. Now, this is how it's always been. It's always been this way, but we see within the use cases for Zerto as the company has grown, by using our technology, folks have additionally converged additional use cases. For example, what we're seeing is a convergence. At first, if there's a flood, a fire, a tornado, you name it, you use your disaster recovery tool. But as the expectations grew, as the platform became more robust, multiple use cases started being applicable. For example, with accidental deletions, ransomware, and what we're seeing in the future, and our vision for the future, is to have a converged DR and backup solution. Now, before we go into the intricacies of how that works, what we want to do is kind of introduce a customer who is dealing with this specific scenario and has the same pain points that we all do, and it's trying to solve and build out a platform and use it effectively for their projects and their strategic initiatives. So what I'd like to do is introduce Brandon Matt of UW Health to discuss this.
Good morning, everybody. Hey, some of us are awake. So at UW Health, on the slide, it tells you a little bit about UW Health as a company. But the most important thing is this last little slide over here, our environment. For me, at least. I don't care about anything else. But our VMware environment has over 2 petabytes worth of data, whether it's just VMs and information stored on those VMs. And as currently we have 2 sites, and the 2,000 plus is actually a low shot number. It's probably 3,000 plus now. What we have seen over the past 3 or 4 years is just an explosion of data, an explosion and a need for data and more data, and not just data, but for that data to be protected, for that data to be constantly available no matter what. So we faced a lot of challenges about 4 years ago. We had 2 different organizations. UW Health used to be actually 2 completely separate organizations, a hospitals and clinic side and a medical foundation side. 2 completely separate entities. One was the actual hospital and the staff in the hospital. The other one was the physicians. They sat down together and realized, why are we separate? So they joined. So it was up to the IT department to begin consolidating everything together. And one of the first teams was our IT team, consolidated the IT department together. So we ended up having 5 total data centers at one point in time. So we had to consolidate that down into just 2. And at one point in time, it was just we consolidated down to 1, and then we actually got another facility down in Des Moines. We have 9 different storage arrays from 7 different vendors. It was maddening trying to figure out where data was and how we're protecting it. So we actually had 4, at one point in time we had 4 different backup softwares running at the same time, I think, 4? At least 3, but maybe 4, I don't know. It was a dark age. But eventually we consolidated, eventually we broke everything down into just one backup platform. But as our organization continued to grow, the data needs continued to grow, we realized that we're not going to be able to meet the RPOs and RTOs that our physicians and the staff at UW Health need. What we're realizing, and I don't know how many people in here would actually say the same thing, what we're realizing is that we've taken our infrastructure and we're tearing it off. We have critical servers that are patient critical, we have servers that are business critical, and then we have other stuff that is critical to the teams that support it, but doesn't impact the business and doesn't impact patient care. But what we're finding is that model is traditional and that model doesn't make sense anymore. We're realizing that every single bit of data, every single system is critical and it's critical to the people who work on it. So we're finding that we make these RTOs and RPOs that we sit down and write an SLA for, and this is what we're going to give you, but in all reality, everything's critical. And we need to make sure that we can get that back to those people as quickly as possible, no matter what their SLA is. So we're transforming our infrastructure. We modernized it. We brought in hyper-converged infrastructure. We set up 2 data centers, and we have replicated data going from one to the other. We migrated everything down into one platform so we can have, the term was simplify. Simplify what we're working on so that we can just focus. Once we simplify, then we can start improving on it. And so we brought everything down into a hyper-converged infrastructure. We brought everything down into a single storage platform and a single data center, and then we expanded to a secondary site. And right now we're in the middle of a business continuity disaster recovery, or BCDR plan, because we never really had one before. It was just get something as quickly as possible. And this is where we're actually sitting down with the business, with the application groups, and getting them to define their own runbooks on how they're going to recover their applications, and we're establishing these SLAs with them. So during our migration, we took all these virtual machines from all these 5 data centers and consolidated them down into one. And I know it says 2 because we eventually opened up a secondary one and migrated stuff to that one as well. But at first we did it into one. And we moved around 2,200 VMs. Varying size, 100 gigs to upwards of 30, 35 terabytes. Took us 6 months, and it took an entire team of 25 people working constantly to get that stuff done. It took a lot of time. It was a lot of hard work and long nights. With Zerto, we began moving our enterprise imaging and radiology department, and so far we've moved about 400 VMs. The total time that's invested is less than a week. And resources, just me, one person. I moved all the VMs, and our EI and radiology departments are very peculiar people, very concerned about their data, and I had no concerns moving any of it. We had no issues. We've had no issues moving 400 VMs. It's gotten to the point where our VMware experts, they don't even bother trying to use whatever native tools are in VMware. They just send me a task and they send me a message saying, hey, I need you to move something, because it's gotten to a point where they've tried and it fails, and they tried and it fails, and they tried and it fails, and then they just say, you know what, can you Zerto this? It's become a verb. And I say sure, and within an hour, everything's, depending on the size, the sync for moving a system, sometimes it takes 5 minutes, sometimes it takes an hour, depending on the size of it. But I move it, and they just say, hey, you saved my life. And our disaster recovery plan, before Zerto, we did nightly backups, nightly snapshots. One snapshot every single night, specific time. And the processes to actually get to that data, it's ridiculous. It's just convoluted. It's just bad. When you look at the model and how these backup softwares work, it's time consuming, trying to just get to the data, try to figure out where it is, trying to figure out what I can do, how can I find this. And a lot of times we could not meet the RPOs and RTOs that they require. Someone needs a critical document. Well, I hope I can find it for you. I hope it was there during the snapshot. You need this VM? Well, here, I'm going to restore it from this time point. Well, that's not the time point I needed. Well, that's the time point you gave me. So sometimes we would start a restore on just a simple 80 gig VM, and it takes 4 or 5 hours. That's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen. With Zerto, because of their journal-based recovery and the constant protection that they provide, it completely simplifies the entire restore process, completely simplifies being able to recover. And I'll give you an example. Andy was talking about flooding. Our administrative office building actually flooded. It's built on a swamp. Brilliant idea. So we had one of our small data centers that was still housing a small VMware environment that just hadn't shut down. And I had protected one system. There was only about 30 systems on there left. They were just waiting to get rid of, to move them off and then shut the whole thing down. But I had protected one thing because someone put in a task, hey, can you protect this for us? Sure, protected it. Flooding happened one night. It was bad weather. The whole entire first floor was just completely stinky, nasty, gunk everywhere. Data center went down. And the server that we protected was our chat server. And not just the chat server, but the database that houses the groups that people are in. And you think, oh, it's not patient critical, it's not business critical. But man, people were just lost. People didn't know what to do anymore. It became critical. People needed their chat groups so they could communicate with their coworkers somehow. So I logged into Zerto, and it had been 13, 14 hours after the protection, after the system went down. We only have a 12-hour protection time window on systems for right now until we could further define our SLAs for during our BCDR. So it was after the 12-hour protection period. And when I logged into Zerto, Zerto had a little message that said, hey, this is still recoverable. Click the button, 5 minutes later, the server was at our primary data center up and running, and the server admin over that, the application admin, he just lit up everything. His world was just righted. So It's simplified it. It's a click of a button to make sure that things are back up and running. We can have RPOs and RTOs in under 4 hours. And depending on what you're protecting, no matter the size of it, once the data is synced to your secondary data center, wherever you're going to have your data land whenever you recover, honestly, 4 hours is you laugh at that because it's like once you click a button, it's up in 5 minutes. So our backup challenges, anybody who has run traditional backup software knows it's complex. There's a specific vendor that we work with. You have your storage that you have to work with, and depending on the storage, multiple storage, you have to set up your primary server, then you have to set up agents that work with the server, and then once you get that set up and you get the interface up and running, if you got it working correctly, then you have to add things into your environment, and then you have to set up policies for protections, and then you have to set up schedules, and you have to set up everything. It's maddening to think of all the steps that are included just to get a backup. Cost, storage cost, licensing cost, unknown, unseen costs that they don't tell you about. Recovery speeds, depending on what you're trying to restore, can take forever, depending on what you're trying to restore. Sometimes I find that when I go into the software, just trying to get to view the data takes longer than it does to recover it. And you need a DR team that manages backups. The backups are once a night. That's it. One time per day. If you have a backup and you work on something and you delete it by accident, sorry, your changes aren't there because it wasn't part of the backup. And so this is what our current environment looks like. So there's a slide similar to this earlier, but this is what ours looks like. We have our production environment, and we replicate our Tier 1 and Tier 2 applications right now. We're currently working with our business application teams, and we have roughly around 30 to 40% of those completed. And it's all based upon the application teams being able to get us the information to make sure that we have their critical systems protected. And then we have those replicating to a Nutanix environment, our hyperconverged environment. And then we also back up those same tiers with the other 3 tiers with Commvault on a nightly snapshot basis. Now, because Zerto at that point in time was strictly for DR, they didn't have the backup capabilities, the functionality wasn't there, so we were just replicating that and then still using Commvault to do a nightly backup. But man, oh man, our beautiful, hopefully someday soon, the golden state, for us, for me, my dream of dreams is we replicate all of our applications, all of them, all 3,000 of our systems. Doesn't matter how big, doesn't matter how small, doesn't matter how important they are, doesn't matter how not important they are. Because honestly, when it comes down to, hey, your application owner lost a Tier 4 system, well, it's not patient critical, but it's still critical to them. It's still critical to their job function. And we need to make sure that we can get it to them as quickly as possible. Replicate those to our Nutanix environment at our secondary site, and then with the functionality that Zerto provides in Zerto 7 and beyond, with their backup functionality, we will be using Zerto to back up that same environment. Why Zerto for backup? Why? I was privileged to be part of the Zerto 7 beta. And when I was able to install Zerto, so when I first got introduced to Zerto, our sales rep, Paul Wurtzfeld, fantastic individual when he gets my name right. He sat down with us and he goes, listen, I'm not going to, he said, it just works. And that's typical vendor talk, right? Like, sure, buddy. Okay. No, it just works. You want to do a POC? Okay, yeah, we'd like to see, and so let's schedule out. He goes, no. Go to this website and download this product. Okay. Now go, you install here. Put this license key. This is your beta, your POC license key. And we plugged it in. And in 30 minutes, we were replicating data. After 30 minutes, I was able to fail over a system. I've never seen a software just work. That simple, that easy. When I got the Zerto 7 beta download and we installed it, it just worked. I installed it, I replicated systems, and from the moment that you start creating a protection group, and you go through the same process that you would do any other way with all the other Zerto products, 6, 6.5, all the other iterations. You set up a protection group, and you go through the same process, you give it all the information, but then you get to your long-term retention tab, and as long as you have your repository set up, which is just your storage, it can be, right now it's NFS or SMB, you set up a share, you just add that to Zerto as a repository, and you click a button. And it pops up, and you have created a backup. And you give it a schedule that you want to have. And the schedule's up to you. You want to do nightly backups, you do nightly backups. And you tell it how long you want to do backups, and then you click done. It's that easy. And it worked. It just worked. Once you have it set up, it's done. With Zerto, we can get rid of backups, completely eliminate backups for Tier 1 and Tier 2 applications. We can just completely use replication. That's it. 90 days, I think it's up to 90 days for replication. It was 60, I think it's 90 now. I might be wrong. But you could just have 90 days worth of protection for Tier 1 and Tier 2 applications. And when you look at the normal time frame of restores that people request, normally they're within the first 14 days. So 90 days is a lot of time that you are working with. You can just completely eliminate backups and just do replication. But with Zerto, you can actually protect servers that normal snapshots can't. We have a database team, and they're very peculiar individuals. Very, very uptight about their systems, and they know if anything wrong happens at any point in time. And it's always that cringeworthy moment when they come walking up to you, and they just, and the one guy that I'm thinking of, he doesn't talk loud. He just has this kind of whisper. And he walks up and he looks at you and he goes, "Something wrong with my backups." And you're like, but you can protect those with Zerto when normal snapshots can't. We normally have to put a client on those systems, and we can't stand working with clients because you can't just restore the VM. You have to build a VM, make it in a like state, and then just try to restore the data and hope it works. With Zerto, no. It doesn't care if it's a database. It doesn't actually impact the system at any point in time. It just replicates the data that's changing on there. And also, consolidated on Zerto, I ran a business, I ran a cost analysis on the backup software that we're running and that we would be using with Zerto. And Zerto won hands down, not only just from the simplification and the fact that it works with all this, but also the cost came out to be a lot better, honestly. So when we recovered with our old Commvault system, you have a snapshot. You have a one point in time place that you can pull data from, and you hope that the person gave you the right time frame, and you hope that you select the right time frame. I got burned on that one last week. I didn't choose the right time point. And so you just hope, right, that it's going to work. You cross your fingers and you hit the button, and 4 hours, 5 hours later, it might be up and running. With Zerto, with the journal-based replication, because it's constantly syncing data, you just say, hey, when do you remember this happening, or when do you know this happened? Well, it happened at 1 o'clock this morning. I can bring you back to 12:58. How's that sound? Well, yeah, sure. They want to. If you can get it as close to the point in time that the system failed, it's more better for the application owners. It's not 3 hours beforehand or 4 hours beforehand or even the day previous. And sometimes when we look at our backups, the backups are still running if they need it at a specific time. Sometimes the backup for those things are still running, so we can't restore from that one specific backup because it's still running. So with Zerto, because it's just constantly replicating, we can restore up to 5 seconds, depending on the time frame, up to 5 seconds before the failure happens. So if files are affected, we got a lot of systems. We got a lot of files that can be affected. We got a lot of communication systems that are affected. Our security systems will be affected. We got security systems that are affected. We got X-ray systems that are affected. We got NICU servers that are affected by this. We want to make sure that, you know what, if I'm in the ICU and an alerting server for ICU goes down, I kind of want that to be up as quickly as possible. So, and our time to recover, just dramatically decreases. It's fantastic. So, from our perspective, what we're trying to do with UW Health is we're trying to just bring everything down and just simplify. And what we found out with Zerto and Zerto 7 is that it helps us with all that. So, thank you.
Good job, man. We'll have to make sure Paul remembers your name now.
Yes, please.
After that, because that was perfect. Thank you. What you've seen is Brandon and that organization's journey, and how Zerto 7 is the beginning of that journey, and how we plan on delivering that roadmap that they have. So that's what we want to talk about, really. It's about a new era for DR and backup. One of the things I heard yesterday, and the reason why this is even a thing, is, folks, it's a simple logic. It's about simplicity. If you're already protecting, within your protection scope, a few VMs, why not back them up? Why not enable use cases for compliance and just have long-term retention to do so? And that's what we're trying to do. We're not going in to say we're now offering a backup solution. And that's something I want to really touch on. We're not another backup vendor. We can't be put in that quadrant. We won't appear on there. What we're doing is identifying the fact that we have an existing technology that's been our bread and butter with continuous data protection, replication, and an existing journal. We've extended that journal to enable long-term retention so that you can do that. We have 30 days. And if you've seen some of our campaigns, we talk about 7 seconds to 7 years. We only say that because it's catchy. It's way more than 7 years. You can do it for 70, 80, however you want. But the point is, we're reinventing backup. We're disrupting it as we know it, because it's just not feasible to continue with snapshots and continue to just have one single copy and all these backup windows and issues that we've seen. And Brandon has touched on every single specific pain point and how Zerto 7 is doing so. But again, nothing's perfect at the beginning. It is a journey, and we will continue maturing the product. We will continue developing additional use cases and capabilities there. But that's what we're doing. And as discussed, we've brought this continuous data replication, this existing technology, up to 30 days where you can easily recover, go back to 4 seconds at a specific checkpoint. For example, if you've been hit by ransomware or whatnot. But ultimately, it's just building on a good technology, making it better, and giving you the simplicity to do so within the same platform. And that's something that we continue touching on, simplicity. If, for example, other vendors, other folks will develop a new solution, and then there's an additional SKU there. Within the IT resilience platform, we're converging DR, backup, orchestration, analytics, all the offerings that we have to enable the team to proactively focus on things that are more important than reactive backup. Backup is antiquated. We need to focus on the future, and it's not within snapshots. And here's just a quick understanding. A lot of you are already current Zerto customers and are aware of how this works. But simply, if you look at the checkpoint, you can rewind and recover at any specific point in time in the past. For example, if you've been hit by ransomware at a specific checkpoint, you can just go back to that moment a few seconds ago and recover the majority of your data, versus having a backup window for hours or nightly backups and having to go in there and not even knowing that you may actually even be able to see what was encrypted or recover that information. So we're guaranteeing the fact that you can recover this in the majority at that specific checkpoint without any impact on your production environment, all the pitfalls of traditional backup. And that's what we call the elastic journal. We have the existing journal that's been the 30-day, but we enabled the elastic journal, which includes long-term retention. So that's that combination. Now that you think of converging DR and backup, it's this elastic journal. And there's actually a really good session led by our chief architect, Oded, where you're going to look under the hood of the journal architecture, really understand how it works, why it's differentiated, and you'll be able to understand how it can solve for those additional compliance and traditional backup use cases. And that's what we see. It's always protected. It's not a disruptive recovery. We've talked about sometimes if a disaster happens or you have some type of attack, you can recover from it. You can do so in seconds without affecting your network. You have the flexibility to choose it, and that's something we want to hone in on. We're software only. We're not going to go in to sell you a box or an appliance or agents or anything. We understand that environments are diverse, and we can't force you to do everything that we like or we think is ideal. What we want is for you to have your current environment, your current storage, whatever you're doing, to continue doing so, but you enabling Zerto to solve for those use cases. And that kind of brings me to the next topic. We're really talking about the target repository. The traditional journal sits on primary storage, but as you enable long-term retention, that's going to sit on secondary storage. And we optimize for those specific targets and protocols on NFS and SMB. And one of those secondary storage and dedupe vendors is Exagrid. And we have a very strong offering with Exagrid, and I'd like to introduce Tom Gillespie as well to kind of discuss how Zerto and Exagrid have worked in the past and how, with Zerto 7 and in the future, we plan on working together.
Thanks, Andy. I'd like to express my thanks to Zerto for having us along and also for making these really awesome noisemakers. Have you noticed how jingly they are? I'm sure we'll put them to good use somehow. So, indeed, we're very excited to be listed in that circle, and what I would like to spend just a few minutes on is why Exagrid, why is Exagrid up here, and why choosing the best backup storage, secondary storage with Zerto is a very important decision. There are certainly cost and vendor considerations all along here, but there are some technical issues that I'd like to just highlight today, and then some follow-on beyond that. So, Exagrid at this point is a leading independent vendor. Independent means that's what we do. That's our whole focus. We have been in that magic quadrant that Andy was mentioning before, associated with being a purpose-built backup appliance with deduplication and replication. Nice high NPS scores. Those are the sort of numbers that you see with Apple and a few others. And I'll have a few slides to maybe explain why that is a powerful score. We are 100% focused on this notion of being a disk-based backup target. And so we're going to be sitting behind Zerto, and I'll just have a few slides to sort of cement those two together. One of the things associated with that is very different architecture from some of those others that you saw in the list. There are architectures behind each one of these choices here, and I want to highlight what is different about the Exagrid architecture. Yeah, no, it's good, thanks. Number of industry awards associated with that, significant customer base at this point, so we're in this business. We know what it takes to produce deduplicated storage, and now are proud to be able to put it together with Zerto as they're bringing that capability forward. So a little bit of the history. We were supported as a target within Zerto's version 6 and 6.5. That was a fairly different sort of backup model. As that progressed and as Zerto went into we're not another backup application, but we're going to start solving the sort of problems that Andy was talking about, that Brandon really highlighted well today. The two teams got together. We were able to teach Zerto a few things about what it would take to organize backups in a way that are effective and performant on disk-based backup appliances, including scale and doing some things in a way that will enable additional features, as Andy was mentioning. So it's been a great partnership, and again, glad to be on that list. And in terms of what other things that might mean for Exagrid and Zerto together, organizations are planning and have been doing cross-training in the various organizations. So we really want to provide sort of a combined solution that is all ready to go and solve your needs. One of the key architectural differences associated with Exagrid is something that we call scale-out. This is a pretty busy slide, so I'll start by mentioning that Exagrid's on the right in the green, and then everybody else. So Exagrid's architecture is different than anybody else in the industry in terms of providing deduplication and also replication. One of the first things that's different is with everybody else, you pretty much have a single controller that contains all of the horsepower associated with doing deduplication. Doing deduplication is a fairly intensive process, so the fact that that's all isolated to a single controller has some real scale and future considerations. With Exagrid, every single one of our appliances contains all of the horsepower, CPU, memory, and the networking, and of course storage, needed to do deduplication. When you add a second one, it comes with all of that all over again, and a third one, etc. So what does this mean in terms of, in this case, a backup window or your ability to keep up with backups, be able to solve some of the considerations that Brandon was mentioning? What happens is, you know, they start off being able to meet a backup window, handle the amount of data that's coming in, so everything is good. But as your data grows, which it will, as Brandon mentioned before, you get to a point where this controller starts to run out of gas. And so you have no choice but to replace that controller at great cost, at great disruption. We sort of paint a little forklift in there and call it a forklift upgrade. Contrasted to Exagrid, where you bring in another Exagrid appliance, it joins the grid, and all of this now is seamless. It has that capability as well as single pane of glass management for these. So the scale out story, what you do as you grow and what that means for preserving and meeting your backup windows is a nice, easy transition. So that's one of the key architectural differences in backup storage, which is why I say again, Zerto has the ability to now be sending long-term retention backups to backup storage. Great news, awesome. Considering where you put those long-term backups and the sort of backup storage that you choose is a very important consideration. I wanted to highlight that today. So, some of the things that Andy was talking about and that Brandon actually got to see is this whole notion of long-term retention storage. So you've heard this, Zerto is providing what it's always been doing, but now this elastic journal, the marketing folks at Zerto said that every time I said elastic journal, they might slip me a drink or something else, so I'm just going to be saying elastic journal a lot. I think that's one thing you're going to be hearing a fair bit at these sessions, but it truly is a powerful concept, including the slide that Andy mentioned where your whole time frame is now covered. Exagrid is providing a very cost-effective, I mentioned the scale-out, place to keep those long-term retention. All of the data deduplication, which is one of the keys to being cost-effective, is done on the Exagrid. So Zerto can rely upon Exagrid for doing the deduplication. And then really the key is when you have long-term retention needs that are expressed in weeks, months, and particularly years, you need the ability to do deduplication, otherwise your costs are just going to be enormous. And so we have a solution ready to go, very cost-effective, integrated with Zerto. And so now you can do that rollback using any part of that journal. Really what that comes down to is people that have needs for long-term retention are often driven by legal discovery, regulatory requirements, etc. If you have that need, you know it. You're having to provide and meet those requirements, and how you do that and how much you pay for it is an extremely, again, important consideration. So this is also a little bit of a busy slide, but hopefully is that, you probably can't see the words, but can you see the pictures okay, at least in the back? All right. So typical Zerto environment here, we've drawn it a little bit differently, but the notion of a protection site, Zerto in place, replicating across to a target offsite, a BCDR site. So this is all a fairly straightforward, traditional, but powerful Zerto solution. What's now happening with Zerto 7, as Andy was mentioning, is that the Zerto that's running at the BCDR site is able to make long-term retention backups to a backup storage device. So there's an Exagrid. That may be multiple Exagrids in a grid combination like we were talking about. However, the main thing is that Zerto is told to make those longer-term retention backups according to the schedule that you've chosen. Zerto manages the retention, the weeks, the days, the months, comes to Exagrid, and then Exagrid does the deduplication. So you're now able to keep many weeklies, many monthlies, many yearlies at the cost of essentially tape, but keeping that on a disk-based backup appliance, courtesy of the deduplication that Exagrid is doing. The other scenario that Andy was mentioning as well is pretty much add to that the fact that in many cases you still do have other backup applications that are still running in your primary environment. This might be a transition sort of thing where I can't move everything to Zerto right away, but I still have backups that I need to protect, I need to save money, on the long-term retention of those backups by using deduplication, et cetera. Exagrid supports over 20 various backup applications, and we're able to, using the same architecture, take the backups that are not yet on Zerto in at the primary site. We're able to replicate that over to the other side, and then you provide protection associated with those primary backups coming in, all at the same time as you're also taking in the Zerto-based long-term retention. So there's a fair bit of flexibility here. I think between the two, we can cover all of the data protection needs that you would have currently, but then also going forward.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Andy.
I think by my count, we owe you 7 beers?
At least, yes, at least.
Okay. It's a lot cheaper than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, thank you for that. And he will have a session, I believe, later on today.
Yeah.
Where you can drive more questions as
Yep.
well and get more content as well.
And we also have a booth down in the Z Connect Hall.
Perfect. So what we want you to get out of this, apart from the changes in the technology, the product innovations, that journey, is simplicity. It's about one platform. Instead of having multiple solutions with multiple reps and multiple licensing models and expirations and whatnot, we envision a future where the IT resilience platform covers all of these needs, whether that's DR, now with long-term retention backup, cloud migration, orchestration, analytics. It's about having one simple technology that's differentiated and one build, really. And so what we're trying to do is continue helping you on that journey. We don't have much time for questions, but we do know that you may have some questions specifically for Brandon and Tom. If you have any questions around the journal itself and the technology, we'll attend the Zerto 7 deep dive or visit us and myself and Arndt, the product manager here at the booth, and we can kind of go over a demo as well. But for now, does anybody have any specific questions for Brandon or Tom?
Yeah, thank you. So if you were to use Zerto for your long-term retention, that keeps your data long-term off-site, but what if you lose your replication site and you need that long-term for compliance? You're no longer compliant at that point. So, I mean, do you guys have a solution to get the long-term locally as well?
Yes, we do. We do. There's a couple more scenarios that I showed you the two. There are two partner ones that sort of add in the Exagrid replication and then how that connects in. The Exagrid's more deep dive session is actually here, I think, next. So I'll be covering some of those. I didn't want to take up quite as much time. But yes, absolutely, the Exagrid replication can go in both directions. And then there's a mechanism for utilizing that to either get your primary backups that are now at the BCDR site or your Zerto long-term retention backups that are now safely back at the primary site.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more.
So, to add on to that, it seems like the main focus of Zerto, which we used before, is replication on our offsite, right? Well, we don't want to saturate bringing our backups back again.
Correct.
I mean, like, replication between two stores, we already do that.
Sure.
We use that with NetApp. We snap mirror our existing backups to our DR